Welcome to the Tax Answers Advisor, the podcast where we tackle the real tax frustrations that taxpayers experience who owe the IRS money. Your ex left you a surprise tax bill, or the IRS has sucked money out of your bank account. If this anxiety and frustration keeps you up at night, then keep listening. Maybe you're feeling overwhelmed by unfiled tax returns, or you're staring down a tax bill you didn't even create. It just caught you by surprise, and now you owe $20,000 or more from actions of your former spouse or your dead spouse, and you had no idea. And now you're not even sure where to turn. You're not alone, and you don't have to stay stuck. Each week, we break down understandable tax solutions that can help you get control back over your finances, get back your peace of mind, and protect your future, one clear step at a time. Whether you're looking to help yourself or want to support a family member who's facing these tax challenges, this podcast is here to empower you with the knowledge you need to make the next best step. Stay with us for this very special episode so you can learn how to move forward with confidence and finally get the tax answers you deserve. This week, we have a very special guest, Carlos Sandman. I knew I was going to do that.
Samaniego. Tongue twist everybody.
Yeah. Carlos here, he's an EA, a CTRC, and an author of multiple books. But think about this. Are the overdue taxes and unfiled tax returns keeping you up at night, or are you feeling overwhelmed by tax issues stemming from a spouse's dishonest business dealings, or perhaps you're years behind on filing yourself? You're not alone, and it's time to take control. We help clients eliminate that feeling of annoyance and embarrassment about owing taxes, ensuring you're not worried about fines, fees, or penalties. We remove the stress and anxiety of dealing with the IRS so you won't face unexpected tax liens or surprises like having your money sucked out of your bank account, or even worse. Visit taxreliefcall.com today to schedule your introductory session so you can get on the road to sleeping better at night and having peace of mind. I want to give a big welcome to you, Carlos. How are you doing today?
Marcelino, excellent. Thank you for having me on. Excellent morning. Got a cup of coffee and taking care of this podcast early in the morning. That's a good day.
Yes, off to a good start here. So, can you take a few moments to please introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background?
Oh, absolutely. Marcelino, again, my name's Carlos Samaniego, that complicated last name that sounds like San Diego. And the funny thing, Marcelino, I was actually born in San Diego. So technically, I'm Carlos Samaniego from San Diego. How do you like that one?
Beautiful.
Uh, uh, Again, kind of a little bit about myself, and we'll talk a little bit more about it during the show. Just a regular guy. Grew up pretty much my entire life in Southern California. Um, right, got out of high school. Once I got out of high school, I joined the Army. Was a medic in the Army. Came out of the Army, ended up becoming a EMT medic. The guys that are driving around in the ambulance. Did that for like um, 11 years, but was a medic for almost 14 years when you take the military and the civilian time. And, during that time frame, kind of what kind of led me to where I am and our conversation today, I ended up taking some bad tax advice from somebody you shouldn't be taking tax advice, a 20-year-old EMT medic in the
Mhm.
ambulance that basically had told me, "Hey, if you want to make some extra money, best way to do it is just don't have withholdings in your check, claim 10 exemptions,
Oh
and
my.
you're going to get a bigger paycheck." And guess what, Marcelino? He was absolutely right. I ended up getting a big paycheck, and um, make a long story short, I did that first year, ended up with a big tax bill when I had the tax returns prepared.
Mhm.
And I did what a lot of people do when they get caught up in a situation where they owe a lot of money. They think by not filing it, they'll be okay because no one will know they owe the money. And that's what I did. I didn't file it. So next year rolls around and same thing. I didn't change the withholdings. Ended up, IRS wasn't taking any money out of my paychecks. Ended up owing a whole lot of money again that second year around. And I didn't file the tax return again. So that's 2 years of unfiled returns. Flash forward 8 years, and that's
Mm.
literally I ended up becoming an 8 year non-filer, and living the life of what a lot of your listeners might be dealing with. Just being stressed out, afraid, not sure what to do, who can help me with that situation. And it literally, I did the 8 years of non-filing, and eventually I ended up started filing my returns. And the only reason I did is because the state of California found me, if you want to call it that. A lot of times they're like, well, I think the government forgot about me. The government never forgets about you, right? They just haven't gotten to you yet. And the state of California did find me, so I ended up starting filing again after that 8 years. But it wasn't until my mid 30s. Remember, that was an 8 year time frame. By
Mhm.
this time, I'm in my early 30s, but it wasn't until I was no longer a medic. I had left that job, ended up getting in the real estate industry, ended up meeting my future spouse who was looking to buy a house. I was qualifying her for a loan. I was a mortgage officer by this time. Complete career change, right? And I ended up falling in love with her, and we started dating. A couple of years later, we got married, and then I did the biggest scumbag move ever, Marcelino. I married her and didn't tell her I had this 8 year non-filing, almost
Mm.
$100,000 of total tax debt between the IRS and the state of California,
Mhm.
which you're probably thinking, what a scumbag, and you're 100% right. That was a scumbag move. Um, but what I did do, Marcelino, right after I married her, literally at my wedding, I remember to this day at my wedding day I was thinking about my unfiled taxes and my tax bill on my wedding day because I knew Liz hadn't known about what was happening in my background. And went on her honeymoon, came back, and I immediately started doing research, looking at who can help me with this problem. And as you know, Marcelino, there's only three types of people that can actually help you. I ended up finding an enrolled agent, CPA, and I went to him, Ernie. I call him my angel, and he told me I wasn't a bad person. I just made a stupid mistake.
Mhm.
But one thing that he said, and I think a lot of your clients will tell you this, once they find you, they say this is the best thing that ever happened because he goes, we can fix this problem as long as we know we can do it. And he did that. He fixed that problem. And back then, that was a while ago, he had actually told me, I remember after he fixed my problem, he actually said, hey, if you're ever looking on another career change, I think you'd really be good at this work. And here I am. Now that's what I do. I help people with similar problems, and I
Mhm.
train people um, um, throughout the country about on how to solve these types of problems.
Mhm.
That's my short
Wow.
story.
That's the short story. And that's the short version of it. And there's
Yeah,
a whole lot more to it. We're gonna dig a little
yeah,
bit more into some of the details there. But I really love this, Carlos, because this is even more personal for you in solving this issue than me, because I've never gotten to that kind of tax issue, but I love solving it and I like working with it. But for most people, and obviously for you, it's very personal because you can actually empathize very well with them, which is a good quality. We don't want to make them feel like you were told you're not a bad person, you just made some bad choices.
yeah.
Is really it.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Marcelino, because what happens is that I know a lot of reasons why somebody doesn't. It's one of the reasons I didn't get help right away. I was ashamed by what I had done. This is called in my book. I wrote a book called How to Make the IRS an Offer They Can't Refuse. It's kind of like mafia based. My favorite movie is The Godfather, and there's a law in the mafia, right? It's called omerta. Omerta basically says, hey, you don't talk about the mafia to friends, family. It's a secret that they keep within the family, right? Well, I think a lot of clients, a lot of people that deal with tax problems have this internal secret, like I did. I didn't walk around telling my friends that, oh, I'm not filing my tax returns. That's why, and making all this extra money. That's why I can afford to buy you drinks at the nightclub. Or
Mhm.
the reason I can afford the truck or the new apartment is because
Mhm.
I'm not paying taxes. So you don't tell nobody. And what we find out when we're interviewed, I'm pretty sure you agree with this, Marcelino. You start talking to them. A lot of times their family members don't know, their spouses don't know. Like in my
Mhm.
situation, their future spouses don't know. So it's this secret that we keep, and we don't know who to go to talk about the secret. So our jobs, and you said it, I can empathize because I understand the secret. But the secret is the one thing that will kill you. financially. It will
Hmm.
destroy your life if you don't let someone know that you got the secret and you want help.
Hmm. Yeah. So as you were going through your little journey there, you said you took the tax advice of a 20-year-old coworker.
Yeah.
Was there any other perhaps some misunderstandings as you go along there? Is that just the start of it, or was there other things besides some of the feelings that had led you to build up the debt and just kind of try avoidance for a while?
You know, the story was, and he didn't do any harm. A lot of
Hmm.
people do this. How many people do we know that come Christmas time bonuses, they claim 10 exemptions, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, and you know what? I wasn't again, I was my entire career prior to that was really a fast food job and the
Hmm.
military. And then now here I am with my what I would call my first civilian profession. And I was 19, 20 years old. I started
Hmm.
that. So, and he didn't lie. I did. You claim more exemptions, you make some extra money.
Hmm.
And but the problem and here's where it gets, and this is my fault going forward from that. I can't blame him. He told me what
Hmm.
people do, and they do that.
Yeah.
It's just I started getting comfortable with the money that I was earning, and my
Hmm.
lifestyle started fitting that I needed that money to live the lifestyle I was living. You
Hmm.
know, um, I had bought the brand new Nissan hardbody truck. I had bought I had upgraded my studio apartment to a one-bedroom apartment,
Hmm.
and now, you know, well, if I start taking taxes out, I can't afford to pay my obligations here. And then
Mm.
you start thinking it's my money. And it's very funny because Larry Wingett, one of my first business coaches ever, um, he's an eight-time best-selling coach. Um, he told me something that was hard hitting. He goes, people think it's their money, but it's not. Or when people call you, Carlos, I would imagine they say they took my money. It's not your money. It was the government's money. It's the tax obligation that you have. You know what? They're not taking your money. They're taking the money that you were supposed to have paid them over the years. So, and then when we start taking responsibility, realizing that,
Hmm.
yes, we have a responsibility to pay taxes, to pay the least amount of taxes legally, but we do have that
Hmm.
responsibility, right?
Hmm.
So, and that's ultimately what it comes. We have to take responsibility for our actions and our financial stuff, and I did during that time frame.
Hmm. Yes, and so during that time frame, you started to grab onto it. Take now, I find it very fascinating that on your wedding day, you were thinking about your tax situation. So obviously, it was deep thought. It was of deep concern to you. So how did that get you to finally start really working on it? And how did it affect you at the beginning of your marriage, frankly, when you think about
Yeah,
that?
yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I wrote a book called Love and Taxes. How to, what is it? It's right behind me. Resolving IRS tax problems in your relationship. And I talk about this is because here's the thing. Yes, I was thinking about it at my wedding. The problem is when you got a tax problem, especially as significant as mine was, the non-filing, the large balance due, it never leaves your mind. You're always think about it, right? You're afraid to answer your telephone because is it the IRS calling? You're afraid to even go to your mailbox. And when you go to your mailbox, Marcelino, how many times have people brought unopened envelopes to your
Hmm.
office because
Hmm.
they're afraid. They're almost like if they open the envelope, they're acknowledging that they got the problem, and and that so that entire time frame, even up to my wedding day, and people have asked me, "Well, Carlos, wait a second. So you're dating her?" Obviously, for a couple of we dated for 2 years, or we're
Hmm.
engaged for over 2 years before we got married. Why didn't you tell her? And here's the logical answer. Most guys will understand this because she would probably leave me if I told her. That's what I'm thinking internally.
Hmm.
You know what? Why the hell do I want to be with this scumbag that doesn't pay taxes and then I'm going to be involved in his financial problems? So yes, that was a very selfish thing I did. A very selfish thing that I did. And the only reason, obviously, I dealt with that after getting married is because I just realized I had literally the person that I claimed that I love and I married, I just screwed her because she just became part of my tax problems for the rest of my life.
Hmm.
So, and I realized at that point in time, that was the one thing out of all these years. Because if you think about it, Marcelino, this started when I was in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm in my mid 30s, 35. I think I got married at 35, right? So this entire time I've been dealing with this tax nightmare and never did nothing about it. But this point where I was ready to get married, I got married. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I got to deal with this, and then I just started doing extensive research way back then. I was like, who can solve this? And I didn't realize that there were people that specialize in this,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what happened with me. I did find Ernie, rest his soul. He recently passed
Mm.
recently, but he saved my life.
Yeah. So you got with Ernie. Uh, he said he was a CPA or enrolled agent or
Yeah,
both.
He was enrolled agent, CPA, former IRS agent.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
What a combination. But
yeah,
yes, definitely help you. So you found him,
yeah.
he walked you through the process. So once you started the process and getting through it, how long did it take to get to the end of it? Because we both know it's not a overnight process to get
No,
it
it's
done.
not. And I remember when we started the process, and when we initially started the process, it was basically he got me compliant, and and all compliance is filing the returns that were missing. So once we filed all the returns we were missing, then I really knew, what was the problem, because a lot of people, and I go back to my medical training here. A lot of times when you're dealing with symptoms like medical symptoms, right? I got a headache. My back hurts. My neck hurts. I got this extreme pain in my head. Those are just symptoms. And
Mhm.
and when you're dealing with the tax problems, again, you get the symptoms. It might be a wage garnishment. It might be a bank levy, and you haven't filed a return. Marcelino, how
Mhm.
often does it happen where you talk to somebody? Well, when's the last time you filed your return? And they're like, I don't know. So what we do in this business is that we have to kind of triage. We have to find out what the
Mhm.
real problem is.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's what he did. He
Mhm.
filed his power of attorney, pulled records from the IRS and the state, because
Mhm.
if you live in a state that's got state tax issues, you got to deal with them too, right?
Mhm.
And then he found out what the real problem was. And then, we had to go file the returns. And I remember our initial goal was to file a currently not collectible. That's where, at that point in time in my life, I didn't have the ability to pay back. The balance was so large, there was just no
Mhm.
ability to pay that back. And that was my the first, at that time, by the time we had that figured out, I think it's been so long, and I wish he was still alive, because he took such meticulous notes. He'd know the exact dates on everything. But
Wow.
I would imagine it took him, 4 or 5 months by the time we've completed everything to get me in that not collectible status.
Okay. So that
And then eventually, over time, we were able to pay down some of the tax debt. Some of the tax debt actually did expire. So it was a combination of things. But um, you know, you're looking at anywhere from a 2 to 6 month time frame where he was able to kind of put a complete
Mhm.
stop to everything, and for me to start rebuilding my life again
Mhm.
financially.
Okay. Now it's interesting, not everybody kind of takes the journey you do because many times they'll come in and they'll see us as enrolled agents to get their tax resolved and they go on with whatever their profession is, whatever they're going to go do, they go and do that and they move on.
Yeah.
Now, you took the unique step from having your experience with the tax debt to go in and I've gone through this. Why don't I go in and help people to do this there? So how did your experience influence you to go ahead and come into this line of work and do
You know,
this to help people?
it's kind of funny when I think back about this. I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit since I was a kid. I mean, my first job, I was 12 years old, 10, 11 years old, excuse me, working janitorial jobs with my mom, who had a janitorial type business. Um, so I got that entrepreneurial spirit pretty young. So even when I joined the military, I think the reason I left the military because I did have this entrepreneurial spirit, and I'm like, I really can't do that in the military. So when I got it, but at the same time, I loved being an army medic, a site tech. I was actually a trained site tech,
Mm,
but my job ended up being just within the ambulance industry when I got out. Um, but what I loved, the reason I kind of went into love the ambulance industry is I only worked 10 days a month. Okay. So like those firefighter schedules, 24-hour shifts. But during those 11 years of doing the ambulance job, I had a lot of entrepreneurial little adventures that I was taking into network marketing, into a photography business. And believe it or not, you're going to crack up on this, Marcelino. I actually got my California license to do taxes.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because there's a separate licensing in
Yeah. So
California.
So I was actually doing taxes while I wasn't even filing my own taxes for other people. This is
Wow.
it's ironic that it's just, it doesn't even make sense.
Hmm.
Because I really did. And part of me is, I think I loved, the reason I love the EMT medic part of it is that helping people. And I think
Hmm.
that's always been ingrained in, and even in, from a financial point of view, doing taxes, you're helping people, right?
Yeah.
So that was my initial kind of introduction to the tax world. So, but once I started kind of dealing with the problems, dealing with this entire tax problem, and then Ernie getting involved to fix my tax problems, he had said something. And I remember because when he was fixing my problems, um, his staff had completed most of the tax returns that were unfiled. And then we found out we had an extra tax return that needed to get done.
Mm.
And and I remember telling him, "Hey, why don't I do this? I'll get the tax return done." And he kind of looked at me. I go, "Well, I used to do taxes," and he started laughing, right? And I said, "I'll just do that return." And I did the return and gave it to him, and he's like, "Man, you did this. You did a pretty good job here." So, and I think it kind of stayed in the back of his head because by the time he finished up with me, he had whispered, "Hey, Carlos, man, if you're ever looking for a career change, I think you'd be really good at this type of business." And I go, "The tax business?" He goes, "No, helping people with tax problems." And I go, "Really?" I go, "Well, I'm not going to go back to school. I don't want to become a CPA because I knew that the people that could help." He goes,
Hmm.
You can become an enrolled agent. You don't have to become a CPA."
Hmm.
Um, and that kind of just stuck in back in my head. And then, like I said, but when he had fixed the problems, I was in the real estate industry, and this was 2008. It was the big depression. Remember the big recession we had?
Hmm.
The market just tanked, the real estate market. So I eventually got out of the real estate, the mortgage and real estate business, and I didn't know what the heck I was going to do. Back then, a lot of people lost their jobs. The real estate market tanked. I was
Hmm.
trying to figure out what to do with my life, and I had actually decided to become a minister at
Oh,
our church.
wow.
I actually became a chaplain, became a licensed trained chaplain with the church. And the minister she had her retirement plan was Carlos is going to take over my church. And that was the trajectory I was going on. And then I had just come to the realization, and at that time, I still had my son Andrew was still in school. I had a young daughter, and I just realized, and the church was financially struggling. It's like I'm not going to be able to support myself on a ministry
Hmm.
salary, and in that realization, I'm just like I don't know what to do. And
Hmm.
then I thought about it. Me and my wife sat down and thought about it. A friend of mine actually asked me, "Hey, why don't you get back into the real estate business?" Because the real estate business had kind of re came
Hmm.
back together quite a few years later,
Yes.
and I almost did that. I almost got back into that industry, and then Liz was just like, "You know what? The problem with real estate, it goes up and down. And like
Hmm.
right now, we're dealing with a down market of real estate, right?" She
Hmm.
goes, "Why don't you do what Ernie told you? Get into the tax business. No matter what, taxes are going to exist." Um, and I said, "You know what? I'm going to do that." And then I just decided I got my license again to prepare taxes. And then I started just learning more about the resolution space and started studying to become an enrolled agent. And here I
Hmm.
am.
Yeah, and here you are. So when you did that, which version of the test did they have? Was it the 4 over 2 days, or was it
It was
by computer by
the
then?
three tests, the three tests.
You added on 3 tests.
Yeah, I
Okay.
had
Yeah. So you were a little bit later then. Yeah. Because I
yeah.
did mine. It was 2 tests. Oh, it was 4 tests over 2 days.
Oh wow. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
And it was written. You had to go to an IRS specific testing site at the time. So
Oh wow, wow, wow.
yeah,
No,
it was pretty intense. Took me
oh
two
yeah,
shots to get through them all,
absolutely.
but yeah. Anyway, I digressed a little bit on that. So you got up, now you got your EA, you're up and
Yeah.
rolling there. How about lessons from your own case that sometimes you're now using as you meet with clients, that maybe someone had told you?
You know what? What I tell all my clients, and then what I tell people who want to become clients or just reaching out to me, the hardest thing to do, and it's with anything, whether you're working out or you're going back to school, you just have to start. You have to make that first move.
Mm-hmm.
Making that first move for me took all my 20s into my 30s. It took what, almost 17 years if you want
Mm-hmm.
to, if you had the combined time. But and it's almost like the same thing that people that go through bankruptcy always tell me. A lot of times people they put off bankruptcy, they know they need to go bankrupt, they put it off, and then when they finally go through bankruptcy, they say, "I wish I would have done this earlier." And same with you're dealing with the tax problem. When you got one, you're putting it off, you're delaying it, you're procrastinating, and when you finally start to get it resolved, you think to yourself, "I wish I would have started this early." Because we both know, Marcelino, is that these tax problems are this big. Every year you wait, it just snowballs into a much bigger
Mm-hmm.
problem.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the last 4 years, where the IRS really hasn't been very aggressive going after anybody. And a lot of people think, and you could be watching this thinking, well, they probably forgot about me. They didn't forget. They just haven't gotten to you. And now, and we're all noticing in this industry, they're aggressively coming after people now. Um, and if anything, for my own lesson, is just don't procrastinate getting it resolved. Reach out to Marcelino and say, "Hey, I'm ready to do this." Because here's what you don't want to wait. You don't want to wait until you got a revenue officer assigned to your case, or you're getting that letter 11 that says, "You know what? You got 30 days to deal with this now, or else."
Mm-hmm.
Because it gets much more expensive. You become a priority. I tell my people, it's going to cost you more because now your case literally becomes priority over everybody else because we're
Mm-hmm.
on a strict time limit now. So that's the one thing I would just say is just don't wait. For me, it took the state of California going after my bank account. That's what it did.
Mm.
That's what happened. They went after my bank account, then they went after my paycheck, and then I realized I got to do something. Unfortunately for me, I was able to deal with California, which was great. And I still, this is the stupidity. I was dealing with California, but was still ignoring the IRS. But back then, Marcelo, that's when everything was being
Mm-hmm.
mailed to you, right? And it was hard to find people, but everything's so electronic. We live in a digital world now. They know when you move,
Mm-hmm.
they know when you switch banks instantaneously.
Mm-hmm.
It was much easier to do that way back then, not now.
Yeah. And that's something that not very nice that you bring out. Oftentimes, it's not the IRS that motivates you. Oftentimes, it's the state, whatever state you're in. That's the one that'll motivate you because they'll send out the garnishment. They'll send out that usually based off information they have from the IRS, even though the IRS hasn't taken action yet.
Absolutely.
Because
It's why
I've seen that a lot.
Yeah, it's why I wrote my most recent book. It's called Shut Down Cali Claw. It's a
Mm-hmm.
California-based state book. It's because what I'm trying to let people know, especially people in California, is that you know IRS is scary. You don't want to deal with the state of California.
Mm-hmm.
They will come after you so fast, hence Cali Claw, because they'll claw after your bank account. They'll claw after your paycheck stub. And the thing with Cali Claw, which I find really amazing, is that they will assess a tax on you what they think that you would owe based on an occupation
Mm.
not
Oh
based
yeah.
on not based on third party information that they got. They'll
Mm-hmm.
just make up a number. They'll just say, "Oh, you had a real estate license.
Mm-hmm.
You may not have ever been working as a real estate agent, but you did have an active license." And they
Mm-hmm.
say, "Well, average real estate agent makes $100,000 a year. Here's your tax bill based on that."
Mm-hmm.
Made up number.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of states do that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes. Colorado does that on sales tax. I've seen sales tax bills come through. I'm like, no, well, it's because they didn't file their sales tax return in that case. And I'm like, they don't even do that much. Where in the world they come up with that number? So anyway,
you know,
exactly. The states will definitely do that. So a person comes to you and wants to start getting their problem resolved, but then, you know, there's all this there's real misinformation and misconceptions that people have.
yeah.
So what have you encountered a lot when people come into you and say these crazy things? What are some of these things?
Yeah, one of the biggest ones you hear, especially when people, it's kind of funny when you're dealing with the tax problem. It's funny how it seems like every radio ad is or TV ad is meant
Hmm.
directly for you, and it's usually a lot of these bigger companies that are claiming that the government is just giving away pennies on the dollar trying to settle your
Hmm.
debt. That is a very common thing that we hear, and I tell people all the time is that. the government does have a program where they will negotiate your debt. But the problem is there's some very strict guidelines in
Mm-hmm.
regards to that, very strict. Um, we have almost 100% success rate on our offer and compromises, but there's a lot of financial information that you have to go
Mm-hmm.
through um, in your personal situation to analyze those numbers. And it's not a negotiation. A lot of times people think, Marcelino, that
Mm-hmm.
you're negotiating with the IRS on, you're just going to come up with a number to negotiate or a certain percentage. It's nothing like that. It's like they're literally looking at your income. They're looking at your
Mm-hmm.
exact expenses. They're figuring out a formula there. They're looking at your assets that you have and figuring out a formula there. And then that's how we come up with the number. And that's where this whole thing starts. Um, so I think that's the big one that everybody's getting this, or the IRS is just giving it away.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's a program, but it's not. Um, it just you have to have a trained professional really to
Yeah,
work at that
it's
stuff.
not as simple as it sounds in a
No,
lot of the ads that we
no,
both hear
not
there.
at all. And the other one is that I get a lot of people that, and I think you said, I heard you say this before. People hired companies and they're paying them $500,000 a month for like 2 years trying to get a tax thing resolved, only to find out nothing has been done on their case.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? I say you want to deal with a professional like Marcelino that that's going to be personally working your case and knows exactly
Mm-hmm.
what's happening. Not talking to a salesperson on the phone that's just trying to get you to sign up for their program. And sometimes what they'll do, Marcelino, they'll offer really like a low amount to get started. Oh, for
Mm-hmm.
$500 we can get you started, and that's just to hook you. That's
Mm-hmm.
that fish hook that gets in there because you're going to get that next phone call that they
Mm-hmm.
need 3 or 4 or 5 thousand dollars more to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to be really careful.
Yes, yes, we got to be careful. And that's what, like when one's call, whether it's speaking to you or when they call my office, uh, they speak to a small group of people because
Mhm.
you call these 800 numbers and some of these things, you don't often know who you're going to talk to. You may not even get the same person. Who knows how? I mean, I don't know how any of them work, but usually when you call an 800 number, you don't get to talk to the same person. You're kind of starting all over again. But at least when you call one of us here or call our office, you're going to get someone who has notes on your case, is right there, right on top of it, very personable, someone who has taken time to get to know you and that is personally working it, which is what's so important when you're trying to get your tax problem solved. Like the gentleman I've been working with for almost a year now in working on his, getting him compliant, now getting him trying to figure out what he qualifies for. Cause I told him yesterday, cause he brought his information in. I don't know what direction we're going yet because I haven't done this calculation. Now that I have this information, I'll get the calculation done and we'll figure out what we're going to do. We're going to do the best job. And if we need to come up with some strategies to make you qualify a certain area, we'll go that way. But we have to figure out where you are first.
And I appreciate you bringing that up, Marcelino, because it reminds me of an email, and I just did an email about this. We had a client that sent me an email a couple of last week, and the email was basically, "Hey Carlos, I hired you back in November of 2024, and nothing has gotten done on my case. What is going on?" That was the email I got.
Hmm.
So, and it was funny because what people don't realize is how much is involved in getting your case ready to deal with the resolution part of it.
Mhm.
And let me explain on this specific client. When you hire us, I mentioned initially we have to go through that initial phase of the triaging to find out what the problem is, not what you think the problem is. And with this person, she thought her problem was 2 years of returns that was like over $100,000 of tax debt for 2 years of returns. That's what she thought the problem was. And again, the reason we filed that power of attorney, we need
Mhm.
to find out what the IRS or the state what they believe the problem is. So by the time we filed the power of attorney and started digging into her case, which took about 30 days, 45 days. So now we're into December, right?
Mhm.
We found out not only did she have 2 years of unfiled, 2 years of filed returns with $100,000 of debt, but she also had two other personal tax years that weren't filed, 23 and 24 that weren't
Mhm.
filed. Then we also found out that she was running. running a corporation and never filed
Mm-hmm.
her corporate returns. Then
Mm.
we also found out from the state that she was illegally operating because they had suspended her business a couple of years earlier.
Oh my.
So here we are, she thinks she's just got a $100,000 tax problem that needs to get resolved. And no, we have to do what? And
Mm-hmm.
Marcelino, right? We got to do the bookkeeping for the corporate returns, get the corporate returns filed, then get
Mm-hmm.
the personal returns, federal and state returns, and all this. And even before and after we did that, then we had to work with the state, a different entity altogether, a division of
Mm-hmm.
reactivating the corporation so it can operate legally. And then by the time we did all that, that took almost 6 months. And now that when I got this email, she's asked, "Well, what has happened?" Well, I had to list, well, this is everything that's happened. And now that this is all done, now we can go deal with not your $100,000 of tax debt. It's now almost $160,000 of tax. You see what's happening here.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to understand that it's not as simple as, oh, solve my problem. It's kind of what the doctor does, right? The
Mm-hmm.
doctor doesn't say when you're calling up feeling sick, show up for surgery next week. He says,
Mm-hmm.
let's get some blood labs,
Mm-hmm.
X-rays, MRIs done. Let's prep you for the possible surgery you may need. And then once we're all prepped up and once
Mm-hmm.
I know what's going on, we can now go solve the problem. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where she's at. We've done all the initial work. Now we can go solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you need a professional to know exactly what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
because what you think is going on might be the exact opposite of what's actually going on.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely there. Now, you've been in this space for several years now, Carlos. Is there a success story of someone you've helped that kind of reminded you of your own situation and how that person was transformed by their experience in getting their tax issue solved?
You know what's interesting? There's not one in particular because
Mm.
now we get them every day. And I don't know if it's because of my book, the Love and Taxes book that we wrote. We've I think we're actually saving marriages because people are calling us, and it's usually, believe it or not, it's usually the spouse or
Mm-hmm.
the spouse. I My spouse has a tax problem and
Mm-hmm.
we need to get it fixed before we get married.
Mm-hmm.
So we're seeing that on a regular basis, literally almost on a weekly basis. We're getting that call. We know we got a problem. We want to get it fixed. So that's happening like almost on a daily basis. Um, it's just, if you're watching this and you've got this tax problem, especially if you're getting ready to get married or you're already married and you got this tax
Mm-hmm.
problem, you know what? The number one cause of divorce right now is finances, period.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. There's a lot of distrust when it comes down to finances. Um, and if anything, if you're watching this, you got to reach out to Marcelino, to a tax professional that knows what they're doing. Please don't go to H&R Block to try to fix this. They're not trained to do something like this, right? You need to find a professional that understands how this stuff
Yeah.
works.
Yeah. We if you do happen to need it, you can look at one of my other podcasts that actually talks about divorce and taxes. And if you need that route, we're trying to keep you from going that route. But
Yeah.
if you need that route, we have
Yeah.
that information out there too for you. So
No, no, absolutely. I literally have a case I'm working on this morning. I got to work on it. Um, an individual, they're divorced. Didn't know they were divorced in our initial conversation. He says, me and my wife has this massive tax debt. I'm trying to get it resolved. A revenue officer assigned to the case. And, we're doing all the paperwork. And then I noticed something right away. It's like the spouse has a Hawaiian address and you're here in California. I'm like, are you guys living separately? He goes, oh, no, 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 no. We're not divorced. We're divorced. But it's just our joint tax debt from when we were married. And I'm like, well, you know what? I can't legally represent her, because he had filled
mhm,
out the paperwork and she was supposed to sign this paperwork. We were supposed to do all this virtually.
mhm.
But prior to me sending this off, I'm like, I got to have a conversation with. He goes, well, no, you don't. You don't have to have a conversation with her because I'm taking care of this. I just don't want it to affect your current marriage. And I'm like, That's not how this works.
Yeah. Oh my.
If she wants to reach out to me and and me be able to help her and retain her for
Mm-hmm.
her joint liability here, we can do that, but I can't just do it based on what you're telling me what to do. So
Mm-hmm.
so as you can see, and you brought this up, even after divorce, you're still dealing with this tax problems
Mm-hmm.
that don't go away. So
Yes. Yes, definitely. I got a case not quite like that, but similar in the sense of a couple that's now divorced since it occurred and in the year in question that we're working on, but now apparently she's looking at getting remarried, so we're trying to get it solved before she gets
there you
remarried there.
go.
But
Right.
anyway, and she's the one actually that reached out to me about a year now. We've been working on and waiting for the IRS to go through their
Mhm.
stuff. So,
Exactly.
one last thought here.
Yeah.
How about advice? If you're a listener here and you want to make sure they're ignoring letters or feeling overwhelmed, once again, what do you want to emphasize for them, Carlos?
You know what? The number one, if anything about 2025 is don't ignore letters. You've ignored them in the past. You've ignored them for the last 5 years. You cannot ignore these letters anymore. The IRS, even though the IRS has wiped out 25,000 people, from their staff over this last few months, I'm actually getting people saying, "Well, I'm not going to worry about it because the new administration is going to get rid of the IRS. There's not going to be any more income taxes."
Mm-mm.
You know what? The IRS has survived multiple wars, the Great Recession, and it collects its tax. And the government has, if anything, they've gotten more aggressive using
Mm-hmm.
AI to go after people, to go after faster, using AI to find out where you're working, what's happening. Hell, IRS has now ICE working with them to go after people. I mean, things have changed that have dramatically. So all I can say is if you got a tax problem, if you haven't filed a tax returns, do not ignore it, and you want to move forward immediately. Um, you need to be a step ahead of the IRS. You need to jump in. You need to reach out to Marcelino and say, "Hey, you know what? I at least want to start this process of getting into compliance because when they do get to me, they will get to you.
Mm-hmm.
They are not disappearing. They're gonna finally come around, and the last thing you want is that massive wage garnishment or a bank levy, and then
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to explain to your spouse, your family why you can't afford to pay something, or you're at the grocery store and your ATM gets denied because you had a bank levy. You can't ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
Just deal with it right now. That's my biggest advice. You will come out of it saying, "Why didn't I do this earlier?"
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely there. Hey, Carlos, I just really appreciate your insights, your willingness to share your story and stress the importance of, yes, getting these tax issues resolved. Uh, Now, you do have, you said you mentioned a few books there
Yeah.
that they can look for. Are they like on Amazon, that kind of a
Yeah, you
thing?
can go to Amazon, pick up my book. I got two books. It's called How to Make the IRS an Offer They Can't Refuse.
Hmm.
And if you're in California, my Shutdown Cali Claw. You can pick up those books um, on Amazon, or you can grab them at my website. But just be aware, if you get them from my website, you can get a whole bunch of emails from me because you get added to my email list. And
Yeah.
but again, you can always unsubscribe from the email list if you get it.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. Hey, Carlos, it's been fantastic. It's been very insightful. We really appreciate how you've once again shared a wonderful story. It's always nice to be able to visit with you. We'll look forward to talking to you again here sometime in the future as we continue to move forward in resolving these tax issues. As we know, the tax is an ever developing, it just keeps changing
Well, thank you,
always.
Marcelino, and keep up the great work you're doing.
Yeah, you keep up the great work too. Now, for you listening to this, if you're feeling that shame and frustration from the unfiled tax returns that are just haunting you, once again, we can help you overcome that burden of feeling isolated and victimized by all these tax issues. Remember, it can be daunting, but you don't have to face it alone. Just imagine transforming feelings of exposure and vulnerability into confidence and optimism. Once again, visit taxreliefcall.com today to schedule an introductory session and start your journey to a better night's sleep and peace of mind. Thank you for listening to the Tax Answers Advisor. And remember, together, we all can make tax time less taxing.